Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1006, 1006, January the 6th, 2020, Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, we have some really important Spygate news today, so we definitely want to get to that, and of course we'll name the dumbass of the week, so I'll get right into that. But before I do, just a couple of thoughts on the Iran situation, which is pretty much dominating the conversation over the last 48 hours or so. And so, you know, as I go through the comments section of the video, my last video, so I do notice there's a lot of people who don't like the fact that Trump assassinated Soleimani or the involvement in Iran or what have you. And I see this as a very positive thing, because while we all probably agree on this channel that we want to see the coup plotters brought to justice in the Spygate fiasco, it doesn't mean that everyone on this channel agrees like a bunch of lemmings with everything I might say or what other subs on the comments section may say. And that's good. It means that I have a channel where the people that come to watch my videos are independent thinking people. They have their own ideas, and it would be pretty weird if we all agreed on everything, especially in really complicated sticky wicket issues like Iran and just the Middle East foreign policy, wars and things and such, just all that in general, because I think we probably have a group of people on this channel that cover a pretty wide swath on those types of topics, and I welcome the comments regardless of what they may be on your position on these issues, and it's good that you kind of hash these things out. So it's all good. I realize that not everybody's going to agree with my take on it, and that's fine. So, yeah, feel free to post in the comment section however you feel, and I see it as a positive. So continue to post your comments as we work through this problem going in Iran. A lot of people making predictions. A lot of people have issues and concerns and worries and fears, and I understand every bit of that. I share that with a lot of you. You're in some. It gets into some pretty. I don't know what the word is, but in dealing any time with issues in the Middle East, it's a little dicey, because it's a very nearly impossible task to try to bring any type of a peace or any type of a situation in the Middle East where we can somehow agree to disagree on things and still sort of, you know, not want to kill each other. But in the Middle East, it just doesn't seem to work that way. So, yeah, I understand it's a very complicated issue, and there will be areas of disagreement, even with people that subscribe to this channel, and that's okay. Now, just so you know, I think many of you people know, before I started doing TowerGate videos, I was doing videos on history and things and such. And I did a 4-hour, I think 4.5-hour video documentary on the history of the U.S. and Iran. I think it was 7 videos. So it's really boring. But if you ever want to go back and watch it, I did the history of the U.S. and Iran. It took me over 4.5 hours to do it. So I know quite a bit about the history of the U.S. and Iran. And it was during the time that I was doing that, you know, doing the research for that and thinking a lot about it, because I lived through the, you know, hostage crisis. I very well understand the coup of 1953 and many other things that went before that. And I point out in my video series that at the end of it, I point out that both the United States and Iran missed a lot of opportunities that we could have worked the situation out. It just never seems to happen. And I admit that there has been bad players on both sides of the equation, and there's a lot of blame to go around with why we have the current situation we have with Iran. I'll be the first to admit that. Of course, all of you probably watch my channel know that not only am I do I call for the CIA to be abolished, but I actually call for the National Security Act of 1947 to be abolished, which would not just get rid of the CIA, but all 17 intelligence agencies. And of course, many of you know I'm very leery of the military-industrial complex, despite the fact that I'm a military veteran and I support the military in general. So I guess that what happened to me is I was going through this and studying this Iranian issue and having lived through quite a few of the various things that have been going on between U.S. and Iran for a very long time throughout the entire course of my life, really. I came to the conclusion at some point that the reason why I struggle with taking a position on U.S.-Iranian relations and how we deal with all these problems that always seem to pop up almost constantly, it seems like, is that I try to have certain principles, and I'm sure that most of you have certain principles, certain beliefs and principles that we have. And what used to trip me up was I would always try to apply my principles to dealing with Iran and other bad actors in the Middle East. And it took me a long time to figure out that that is a flawed strategy for me, because my principles come into conflict with what's actually happening at that particular moment in time and my rational thoughts about what we should or should not do. So I found out that the only way that I can actually honestly comment or have a strong opinion about what's going on between us and Iran, whether it be this situation or the previous one or the one before that or the one before that, going all the way back as far as you want to go throughout the course of my life, I found out that when dealing with issues in the Middle East, you kind of have to take your principles and set them on the shelf, because they really don't apply when you're dealing with the Middle East, because we're dealing with quite a few cultures in that region that literally are practicing 7th century ideologies, and it creates a big problem. So I kind of have to separate out and put my principles on the shelf whenever I try to diagnose a situation with Iran and what I think we should do about it, because it's your principles are based on rational thought and dealing with rational type people. But in the Middle East, for the most part, we're dealing with people who, at least from our point of view, are irrational. So I have to kind of separate out my principles when dealing with issues in the Middle East, particularly with Iran. So that's the only way that I can actually come to a conclusion about how to think about what we should do with Iran. If I were to apply my principles to what's going on in Iran, I would say, well, we should just pull all of our troops out of Iraq, out of everywhere in the Middle East, and to a large degree, I do believe that. Although I do believe you have to have some sort of presence somewhere in the region to respond to the types of things that are going to happen. But I'm not foolish enough to believe that if we pulled all of our resources out of the Middle East, that the Iranians would suddenly start behaving wonderfully. No, that would not happen. They would only take advantage of any vacuum that we leave. And we've seen that whether it's in Syria or Lebanon or anywhere else. So my principles don't apply when dealing with Iran or the Middle East, because we're dealing with irrationality. And so it doesn't work. And so that's kind of how I have to deal with myself in coming up with my own personal opinion on what we should do or not do in Iran. Now, as far as what's going on now, currently in Iran, I don't think any of this is a surprise to the Trump administration. Trump campaigned the entire time on the fact that he was going to take the hard line against Iran and would completely reverse the policy of the Obama administration, which was largely to try to pay off Iran, to try to play nice with Iran, or however you want to look at that. Trump made it perfectly clear in the campaign he would take the hard line and he would hit him if he needed to. But even the Reverend Clinton was saying she would hit Iran and everyone else. But I guess I don't think that any of this is a surprise. I think when Trump came into office, he sat around with his people and they said, well, Iran is the biggest issue we're going to face foreign policy-wise, because they are dead set on getting nuclear weapons. They are the biggest muckrakers and troublemakers in the Middle East nothing, ignoring them is not going to fix the problem. They will not go away. They'll continue to do what they do, and they'll take every advantage. If you do walk away from them, you have to apply the pressure and the heat on them. And so when Trump came in office, the first thing he did was he went back with some really tough sanctions that had been previously taken off. He puts the sanctions back on, and since then he has increased them sanctions. Now, Trump and the people around him know that's going to evoke a response from Iran, because it's going to take effect in their country and cause a lot of problems, which it has. That's why we've seen these protests and riots in Iran going back almost 3 months now. These things have been going on almost daily in Iran. And so Iran is doing what we would expect them to do. They are lashing out. So right now it looks like to me that, the Trump administration knew when they put these heavy sanctions and all the other things that they're doing to Iran would evoke a response from Iran. And I think Iran has responded exactly the way that we probably thought they would. And I'm sure that when they decided to take out Soleimani, that they knew that would also evoke a response, and they're probably prepared to deal with that as well. So I don't think any of this is a surprise. And I do think that they pretty well know what kind of a reaction they're going to get from the Iranians, and they probably played this out and said, okay, if we do this, they're going to do this. If we do this, they'll do this. If we do this, they'll do this. They've probably war-gamed this thing out to the very end, and I'm pretty sure Trump's made it perfectly clear he's not going to do a boots-on-the-ground war. But I think that that he believes, and people around him believe, that the idea is to bring about regime change in Iran from within, and you do that by by basically breaking the country economically and in every other way, militarily and anything you can do. And so I think that this has all been thought out ahead of time, and I think that ultimately they know it's going to be tit for tat, and at some point I think Trump may take a step that, and they're probably prepared to do it, that would be a step farther than we've gone with Iran, at any time at this point, which is not a full-scale invasion, but it would be a massive air attack on Iranian targets inside of Iran, which we've never really done. And I would fully expect that that's probably where we're going to get to at some point if the Iranians don't pull back, and I don't think they will. I don't think Trump and his people around him believe they will. I think that they believe that Iran will try to up the ante and try to respond. And I think that they may even be doing this on purpose to provoke exactly that kind of response from Iran, because they want to be able to hit those sites where they believe the Iranians are developing nuclear weapons. They probably have a pretty good idea where some of those facilities are, and they want to hit them. They probably want a reason. And so they might be doing this to prod the Iranians into doing what they're doing, so that we are justified at some point when we go in and take out those targets. And since we're taking out those targets, you might as well cripple them economically by hitting their refineries, and you might as well add some embarrassment to the situation by possibly hitting some of their historical sites, which I'm not a huge fan of. There's some Geneva Convention issues with that as well. Yeah, I think that this is all planned out. I don't think any of this is a surprise. I think they're getting exactly the type of response from Iran they thought they would get. I think they've played this thing out step by step, and they know that it probably leads to us launching a major airstrike inside of Iran, and maybe they feel that after doing that, the situation will be so bad in Iran that will possibly lead to regime change from within. I think that that's the secondary goal. But I think that the primary goal is to set back their nuclear program 20 years, 30 years, whatever they can do. I think that's probably because I don't think they believe Iran's going to give it up on their own. So I just think that they looked at the Obama policy as appeasement. They want to do 180 degrees from that, and they're doing that, and that's provoking these responses. And I think that ultimately this is probably going to end up within the next couple, if not days or weeks, probably no more than months. I think before the 2020 elections, we are probably going to launch some fairly serious airstrikes into Iran and take out some heavy targets. And I would not be the least bit surprised if Khomeini and his residences, his palaces, are not on those target lists. I think they might be trying to hit Khomeini personally and take him out. That's just kind of my thoughts on that. But we'll watch as the situation plays out. Whether you agree with Trump on his policy or not, we just have to wait and see how it all turns out. But if I'm a betting man, I don't put my money on Iran. They're very weak. They're very weak. And so I would not bet. I would not put my money on Iran. I would bet on Trump on this one, and not that it's going to help him politically, because I don't think it will. I think it will probably hurt him politically, but ultimately, I think he's willing to take a political hit if he can set back their nuclear program, and I think that that's what's driving every bit of this. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. Feel free to continue to comment in the comment section about that if you like. Whichever opinion you hold, certainly respect your opinions, and you're certainly free to express your opinions in the comment section of my videos. I encourage it. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to some really serious news of the day on the Spygate issue. Okay, John Ratcliffe was on with Maria Bartiromo, and he mentioned something that I think is crucial, absolutely crucial. Now, as you know, a couple of days ago, I was talking about Papagalopoulos' video this past Friday, where he brings up something that clearly shows that Uncle Bob the Executioner, the Mueller investigation, Mueller, Weissman, and the whole crew, they are involved in the deep state coup. They are involved in the deep state coup, and I think more than ever, what Papagalopoulos was talking about on Friday, and we'll get back to that here in just a moment because I have more to add to that, so I'll be getting to that here in just a minute. But Ratcliffe comes on this morning on Maria Bartiromo, and he also brings up a very important point, which shows us that it's not just the FBI, the DOJ, or even the CIA that was involved in the Trump coup and all these things going on. Because Ratcliffe is telling Maria Bartiromo, he says that John Durham has interviewed Terrence Dudley, and that Dudley and Gregory Baker approached Papagalopoulos 3 months before Operation Crossfire Hurricane. So what does that tell us? Well, again, it's just another example of things that were going on before Operation Crossfire Hurricane started. This happened 3 months before. And this really begins to point a lot more towards the Obama administration, particularly would fall in the range of Susan Rice, the National Security Council, and those types of people. Because these things are coming from the administration. Because in Papagalopoulos' book, he gets it wrong. In Papagalopoulos' book, he talks about how he was approached by Dudley and Baker. Terrence Dudley and Greg Baker approach him, and he actually ends up meeting with those guys 3, 4, 5 times. He doesn't say, he says multiple times. We don't know exactly how many, but multiple times. Now, Papagalopoulos identifies Baker and Dudley as being DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. Now, I don't know if he just assumed that or if they told him that, but we learned from Ratcliffe this morning that Terrence Dudley and Greg Baker, who approached Papagalopoulos 3 months before Operation Crossfire even started, were not DIA. They, in fact, were U.S. Embassy officials. They were U.S. administration officials working at the embassy in the UK. In other words, they work for the State Department, the administration. They're ambassadors. They work at the embassy. They don't work for the DIA or the CIA or FBI or any of these people. So these are people, because they work at the embassy, these are people that would be directed by the Obama administration, meaning the State Department, or usually ambassadors. It's the president himself. He appoints the ambassadors. They are connected to the State Department to an extent, and they have sort of oversight by the National Security Council. But this would show, and so this ties Dudley and Baker back to the administration of Barack Hussein Obama. not the FBI or the DOJ or even the CIA. So that's a very interesting thing for Ratcliffe to say. And if this is what Durham has found out when he was over in the UK, then this is exactly the conclusion that Durham has just arrived at, which is, wait a minute, these guys are embassy officials. Why are embassy officials even talking to a staffer on a presidential campaign? I mean, it's not even in their lexicon of things to be working on or doing. Embassy officials wanting to have meetings with somebody on the presidential campaign staff? There's no official reason why that would ever happen. So it was unofficial. And apparently, according to Ratcliffe, when Durham asked Dudley about that, he said that they were just curious. Well, why would they even be curious? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. And it won't make any sense to Durham. And you can bet that he's now going to start looking much closer at the Obama administration and particularly the NSC and possibly State Department, because that is where that would be coming from, not from the FBI or the CIA. And another thing, a person who should be really concerned, and we've talked about him a lot, Rodenstein. I just want to go back and revisit a couple of emails I think that we've kind of forgotten about, that certainly Durham is not going to forget about. And I know a lot of us think that Rodenstein is flipped and he's cooperating or whatever. But let's just remember that, again, as is made the case by Papaglopoulos and me on multiple occasions, that the Mueller team is as involved in this coup as the FBI or Brennan and the CIA or the foreign governments or the private contractors. Mueller and the Mueller investigation is not a separate thing from that. Mueller and his investigation were a robust part of that, when probably they were the ones who were supposed to deliver the final blow. If they couldn't take Trump out with something they could find in their investigation, then they were supposed to set up the Democrats for what they would need for impeachment. So Mueller and the whole Mueller investigation and Wiseman, they are part and parcel of the entire coup plot. And I can't imagine that Durham is going to be able to complete his investigation and not eventually realize that Mueller and his team were part of the coup plot. Let's go back to a couple of emails. Here's an email from Rod Rodenstein sent to Uncle Bob, the executioner, Mueller. Rodenstein emails Mueller and says, quote, "The boss and his staff do not know about our discussions." Now, we still haven't figured out who he's referring to as the boss. It could be Trump. It could be Comey. Who's Rodenstein's boss? Loretta Lynch? Or the president? That's the only two people that I can think of that would be, in fact, Loretta Lynch was gone at that point. So, I mean, he was acting AG. So he could only be talking, in my mind, he could only be talking about Trump. When he tells Mueller in an email, the boss and his staff do not know about our discussions. Then Rodenstein sends an email the day before he appoints Mueller. The day before Rodenstein appoints Mueller as special counsel, he sends an email to to Mark Phillip. He was Bush's deputy Bush's deputy AG. So he sends email to this former deputy AG under George W. Bush, Mark Phillip, and Rodenstein says to him, May 16th, 2017, the day before he appoints Mueller, he says, quote, "I am with Mueller. He shares my views. Duty calls. Sometimes the moment chooses us. I am with Mueller. He shares my views. Duty calls. Sometimes the moment chooses us." That's Rodenstein. There's two emails from Rodenstein, and there's more, that show clearly that he was in cahoots. And so when you read this and some of the other emails, then this whole idea that Rodenstein was joking about wearing a wire or joking about the 25th Amendment makes it hard to believe it was just a joke when you read these emails and others showing he was clearly all in for the coup, and in fact, he's the one who appointed Mueller to carry it out. I also had a chance to listen to the interview between Lakova and John Batchelor. And Lakova brings up a couple important points. She points out that meeting that occurred in the summer of 2016, in July 13th to be exact, at Cambridge, in the UK, that some of the main people who were there were Halper, Downer, Carter Page, Stephen Schrage, which is Halper's sort of handler or boss, Richard Dearlove, and Madeleine Albright. They were all at that dinner, and Halper and Downer both gave a speech at that dinner, and I think that the photo that we see of Halper and Downer together was taken there. Because, well, it certainly was taken there. It was at Cambridge. We just don't know the date on the photo, but it would make sense that it was this July 13th dinner, which was first a dinner at one location, then they went back to Cambridge and they had speeches and the various other things that these type of academics do when they get together and talk shop. So keep in mind, July the 13th of 2016, you have over in Cambridge, Halper and Downer and Schrage and Dearlove and Albright and others, and it was Schrage who sent out the invitations on behalf of Halper, according to Lakova, sent the invitations to Carter Page. Also, it wasn't just Page, it was Josh Mueller and Clovis were also sent invitations. They did not attend. The invitations were sent out in the month of June, 1 month prior. Schrage, of course, who sort of acts in this deal as Halper's boss, was the Assistant Deputy Secretary of State, and he was working again on behalf of Halper. Keep in mind, this is all happening before the July 31st Crossfire Hurricane, which shows just more evidence that this attempt to frame people in the Trump campaign was going on long before Operation Crossfire Hurricane. We know that she also says that in August of 2016, Halper tells Brennan that Trump may be working with Russians, and he did this in a "for your eyes only" letter that was given to Obama in August of 2016. That's when Halper first tells Brennan, and then Brennan tells Obama that Trump may be working with the Russians. And apparently the source for Halper on that was Trubnikov. And of course, Trubnikov has been identified as source A and B in the dossier. And Trubnikov was a longtime friend of Halper, and he was Halper's contact, which again goes back to a point I made a couple of months ago, which is the more you look at this thing, it looks like some of this information that was finding its way into the dossier was coming from Halper. Mr. Durham is going to have to untangle that. How is it that Halper is connected to the so-called sources of the dossier, but he's never tied to it? So that's why Durham is going to really have to dig deep into Halper and Downer, and if he can locate him, Mifsud. I'm telling you, they are all connected in this whole plot. And again, more evidence of all these things occurring long before July 31st of 2016, and this is what Durham is going to find. And if he practices due diligence in his investigation, he is going to conclude that Mueller and the Mueller team were a essential part of the coup and need to be held criminally accountable. Now, let's get on to Dumbass of the Week. Well, we have Youngblood. He's going to go with Tucker Carlson for being a snowflake. Keith Fellows. He's going to go with Mad Maxine Waters, or as he calls her, Maxine James Brown Waters. Yes, indeed. Although I love James Brown. Love James Brown, not so much as Maxine. Dennis Waddell is going to go with Khomeini. Yeah, Khomeini. And I think that Khomeini, Dennis, probably has a target on him right now. My guess is they've got people, some eyes on him, and they're watching his movements. They probably got his palaces targeted. I think when they launch into Iran, and I think that's probably in the cards, I think his palaces will be targets. I think they want to hit him personally. Net is going to go with Pelosi and Rice. Okay, pick app Sigma 61 is going to go with the island of Changa Changa for duping Mad Max. Yeah, at one point during that phone call, Mad Max asked about the location where they're having this environmental sit-in or whatever, and they tell her it's the island of Changa Changa. At that point, she should have hung up the phone, but she didn't. She probably thinks, Changa Changa, never heard of that before. Lori Holt's going to go with AOC, Pelosi, Susan Rice, and Mad Max. American Pie is going to go with Soleimani, Mad Max, and Pelosi. Freddie Sheffer, New York Times, and any sub or advertiser that reads the New York Times. Yes, if she makes a good point, if Soleimani would have read the New York Times the previous day, they essentially were tipping him off that he probably was going to get hit. But I guess Soleimani doesn't read the New York Times, and of course he won't be reading any papers anytime soon. Ricky Ricardo, Mad Max. Susan Lowell, Madam Botox. Jeanette Bateman, she's going to go with Mad Max. John Kerry, that's John F. Kerry, by the way, who, of course, served in Vietnam. And, of course, AOC. Joe Mack is going to go with Mad Max. Mike G is going to go with the Pope. I don't know what it is with the Pope, but he's really into this sort of slapping women around lately. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but he's a nasty character anyway, and I don't think very highly of him. Screw the Pope, if you don't mind. I hope you're not Catholic. All my Catholic subs have just unsubbed. Let's see. Iowa Stormy, Deplorable Bot, is going to go with Soleimani, the Demo Commies, and Mad Max. Peaches McBee is going to go with Mr. Salami Man. Mr. Salami Man. Yes, indeed. Peter James, Pelosi, Mad Max, and Chuck the Cuck. Joey D, Rose McGowan. Yeah, that tweet by Rose McGowan was just... I was going to comment on it, but I don't even know where to begin. But suffice to say that if Rose McGowan, if the Iranians actually were running the show in America today, Rose McGowan would have been beheaded a long time ago. Jack Kennedy. Oh, Jack Kennedy is me. You know, it's not often, but it does happen from time to time. I do get nominated for Dumbass of the Week. I know Jack doesn't agree with my take on the Iranian situation, and that's okay. And as far as my giving praise to the intelligence community, obviously I'm not a big fan of the deep state, and I've called for the CIA to be abolished. When I credited the CIA, what I meant was they did a pretty damn good job of identifying Soleimani, tracking him, and then hitting him in the vehicle. I mean, that's pretty good intelligence. I mean, and then getting the drone strike right on target. Nobody else was killed other than the 2 or 3 guys that were going for. I mean, they did a pretty good job on that one. I mean, I have to give credit where credit's due. Not everybody in the Central Intelligence Agency is a bad player. It's mostly the people at the top and the agenda. There's still a lot of probably good people that work at the CIA and the FBI. And the people who were in charge of carrying out that mission did a pretty damn good job. So that's all I was saying there. Jonathan Cassidy, AOC, the Crying Chuck, and Soleimani. Alan Williams, Mad Max, Sherman Lynn, Maxine Waters, Patron, Soleimani. Tiana is going to go with Rose McGowan, John Cusack, the Lame News Media, Obama's Experts, and Soleimani. Jamie Anzavino, he's going to go with Larry Lyons. Congratulations, Larry. Susan Rice and Pelosi. Mary Willis is going to go with Rubio. Sue Sung, Schumer, AOC, and Omar. Stage Door Johnny, the lefties complaining about Trump hitting Iran. Judy Moore is going to go with AOC. Carl Peters is going to go with Nancy Schumer and Queens College. Larry Lyons is going to go with Trump for taking Putin's advice on taking out Soleimani. I'm not sure if he's being sarcastic or not, because I'm pretty sure that Putin came out and was opposed to hitting Soleimani, but that's okay. Douglas is going to go with Linda Ronstadt. Yeah, I saw that too. Rand Paul in the New York Times. Sane Environmentalist is going to go with Tucker Carlson and all the Dem candidates. Cards is going to go with Mad Max. Gene is going to go with Iran putting the $80 million contract on Trump. Kaepernick and Biden. Brian Larkin will go with Joe Biden. Soleimani and Mayor Buttplug. And finally, reads us to the winner, which is Mad Max, Dumbass of the Week. Coming in second place, Pelosi. And tying for third, we have AOC and Soleimani. So there we go. Mad Max, the winner. Pelosi, number 2. AOC and Soleimani tie for third. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you. Bye.